The hypothesis I'd like to share with you, I call the intestinal dysbiosis hypothesis. Essentially what it asserts is that severe alteration of the normal gut flora with beneficial bacteria being depleted and pathogenic microbes favored underlies much of what is called AIDS as it appears among some subsets of gay men. Now, you've probably heard the saying that there's no original thought. When I came up with this idea in 2005, I came up with it on my own. I thought it was all my idea. Well, it turns out it's not original at all. Back in 1996, Ukrainian scientist Vladimir Kalyadin, who I think you know, David Crow, yes, he had written a paper that was published in Continuum. And that paper was titled Destruction of Normal Resident Flora as the Main Cause of AIDS. And when I read it, it was pretty much saying exactly what I'd come to conclude myself, just based on my own reading of the literature. Next slide, please. Gut flora, in case you don't know, are pretty much essential to our health. Some have even called them the forgotten organ. And our intestinal tract is home to trillions of microbes from hundreds of different species. In fact, in terms of actual numbers, there are more bacteria in our bodies than actual human cells. In a sense, we're more bacterial than we are human. These flora evolved in a symbiotic relationship with us over millions of years, and both metabolically and in terms of their contribution to our health, they should be looked at as a virtual organ, one which some have called the forgotten organ. Next slide, please. There's several benefits that these bacteria confer in terms of health. One of them is that beneficial bacteria compete with pathogenic microbes such as Candida albicans for space in the gut. Next slide, please. Gut flora also produce nutrients such as folate, vitamins B12 and K, and make other nutrients such as zinc and selenium more bioavailable. Gut flora are also involved in the production of glutathione, the body's master antioxidant. Next slide, please. Intestinal microflora also help maintain and regulate the gut barrier function. Think of the lining of the intestines as a coffee filter. When it's functioning properly, only the coffee gets through and the grounds don't make it through. The gut flora are kind of involved in that process. Next slide, please. Gut microbes directly stimulate and shape the immune system. The interaction between intestinal flora and our immune system begins shortly after birth as we inherit our flora from our mother, primarily from breast milk. But throughout our lives, these flora keep our immune system primed and directly affect certain aspects of immune response. Next slide, please. So what happens when beneficial intestinal flora are severely reduced in number? Well, four things. Next slide, please. Ubiquitous microbes, fungi in particular, that are normally held in check by commensal flora emerge, resulting in opportunistic infections. The key point to keep in mind here is that a number of the principal AIDS-defining illnesses early on were fungal, candidiasis and PCP, for example. Next slide, please. Another problem that you would expect in intestinal dysbiosis is multiple concurrent nutritional deficiencies. This is kind of a hallmark of HIV/AIDS. There's so many different things that people with HIV/AIDS are deficient in. B12, folate, selenium, zinc, the list goes on and on. So this is an expected consequence of a dysregulation of intestinal flora. Next slide, please. Another expected consequence is that the gut becomes more permeable than normal, allowing antigens to enter into circulation, causing hyperactivation of the immune system. This leaky gut condition is observed in AIDS, and the increasing severity of it appears to be correlated with disease progression. And the chronic activation of the immune system that results from it is a hallmark of AIDS. Some have proposed that the increased production of antibodies, a condition called hypergammaglobulinemia, that comes with abnormal permeability, possibly plays a role in being reactive on the so-called HIV test. Next slide, please. A fourth consequence is that immune abnormalities begin to appear, including changes in lymphocyte composition and number. This, too, is a hallmark of HIV/AIDS. Next slide, please. A large and growing body of research supports the connection between intestinal abnormalities and AIDS, and a couple of fairly recent studies have offered very strong support to the intestinal dysbiosis hypothesis. Next slide. In 2006, researchers wrote, circulating microbial products, probably derived from the gastrointestinal tract, are a cause of HIV-related systemic immune activation. Next slide. A 2008 study asserted that intestinal impairment in HIV-positive individuals is associated with alterations in gut microbiota, and alterations at the gastrointestinal tract level are a key factor in HIV pathogenesis. This particular study was notable because it was the first that compared levels of microbes, both beneficial and pathogenic, in HIV-positive and HIV-negative individuals. Here's what they found. Next slide. 92% of the HIV-positive individuals had Pseudomonas aeruginosa in their gut, compared to 20% of the general population. And what's more, the levels of this microbe was 10 times higher in the HIV-positive crowd. Next slide. And this one is pretty stunning. 100% of the HIV-positive subjects had Candida in their fecal samples, compared to 40% of the general population. The levels of this microbe was nearly 10,000 times higher in the HIV-positive individuals than in their negative counterparts, 10,000. Okay, and let's talk about the beneficial flora. The amount of bifidobacteria, I'm sorry, next slide, thank you. The amount of bifidobacteria in the HIV-positive group was between 25% and 50% of that found in the general population, whereas the levels of lactobacilli were nearly undetectable in the HIV-positive subjects.